in the current series of Thriving Lives Toolkit webinars. This is focused on the Thriving Lives Toolkit for Schools, Principle 7, Staff are Well Informed. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from some excellent speakers today, and also giving time to hear from you. There'll be opportunity at the end to pose your questions to those who've spoken, but also to share your own challenges and the solutions you've come up with, and any other good practice that you're aware of that will help us collectively as a whole community to progress the quality of our support, particularly around Principle 7, staff are well informed. I often remind stakeholders when I'm in meetings or at conferences that it's only what we do differently that gets a different result. So if we want things to be better for service children and young people, then staff are kind of the first and the last action. They're the person in front of the young person, or the person making the decision about how policy should change, the person designing a program, the person providing advice, the person doing research. It's us as professionals who make the difference for young people. So I'm particularly passionate about Principle 7, staff being well informed. I'd like to draw your attention to two other opportunities that are a real a flagship of the Alliance's work. The first one there you can see is our annual conference. We had a fantastic time last year in Cardiff, the best yet, and we're hoping to top that next year. We're on tour, Wales last year, Scotland this year. So in Glasgow on the 26th of November, that's just opened. There's an early bird rate. You should know we try to keep this as cheap as possible. We make no profit from it. Our mission is to try and make it as accessible as we can to everybody. And it's always a really hugely successful event. People particularly like hearing from young people themselves, who we always get to share their experiences firsthand. So we're looking forward to that. So take advantage of the early bird offer. Share it with your networks, please, and encourage them to join in. Also, we've just opened the opportunity to submit workshop proposals. The other thing that makes this particularly powerful is that the Alliance is a place where people get to share their practice with each other. And we are just the group that kind of provides the space to do that. So now's the time to be thinking about what is it that you've done well, particularly around the theme of this year's conference, which is whole person, whole journey. We're really pushing the agenda that thriving lives for service children means the entire of their lives, for the entirety of their lives. So we're looking to cross boundaries between different sectors, education and social care and health, housing, mental health and well-being, and at every stage of the journey, in early years and in primary and secondary, in further education and in higher education. Thriving Lives for Service Children is a whole person, whole journey affair. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is our community consultation. The other thing we do is listen to the entire community, UK-wide, overseas, wherever service children are, and then we understand better what the balanced needs of the sector are. And we do a number of things with those. Number one, it turns into our strategy. We change what we're doing as a result of what that consultation says. The second thing we do is we speak to government about that. So one of the things that's powerful about the Alliance is that we're able to gather lots and lots of voices and amplify them. Various people will have various needs. Teachers in schools and youth workers and researchers and funders have their own needs. But when we are able to join those together and work out what are the kind of shared priorities, we get to make a big difference and a big splash about that. And we do that with policymakers at a senior level, and then with ministers as well. And that's what we'll be doing this year with the public report we produce from the consultation. So please take an opportunity to do those. We'll put some links into the chat for those so that you can find them easily as well. But please take advantage of those opportunities now and ask your colleagues to do the same. I am delighted to say that today we've got some excellent speakers, people I know well, and Emma, who I don't, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. But Dr. Anne Chappell from Brunel University of London, and her colleague, Dr. Ella McHugh, unfortunately can't join us just last minute because of a personal situation. But Anne, I know we'll be in safe hands with you. So thank you very much for your contribution today. And also Emma Thompson from East Riding of Yorkshire. As I was telling Emma just a few minutes ago, I often hear good things about East Riding, but I've not heard them firsthand. So I'm really looking forward to that today. My name is Phil Dent. I'm the director of the SCiP Alliance, and Vicky Fisher is with us, the engagement manager who's been running this excellent webinar series. So thanks to you, Vicky, as well, making all of this possible. Today is about staff being well informed, and for us the vision for Principle 7 is that supportive training and networks ensure that all staff understand and support each service child. There's a summary there of the 5 questions within the Thriving Lives Toolkit that provide the self-assessment framework for Principle 7. This is the first opportunity really I'll take to say a few things that I'll say again and again. Number 1, if you've got thoughts and questions and ideas, things you want to bring to people's attention, please use the chat for that. That can include sharing your contact details if you're offering that. You don't have to. If you've got things you're doing you'd like people to know about, again, the chat is there for that purpose. Please do that as we're going through. And the other thing, the reason we're sharing this here is we'll be doing the same at the end. We really want your feedback about the this webinar and the webinar series. This is the end of this particular series, but we'll be up again and running in the autumn. And we want to obviously always continue to improve these things. So hearing from you is how we do that. Hopefully the QR code there you can use with your phone if you want to and open that. But again, if Vicky will put in the link, a link to the feedback as well now, so you can do that at any point while you're listening, if that helps. I'm going to start by attempting to share with you the short video that's on our website that provides a summary of the kind of the research and background context for Principle 7, and then we'll get on hearing from Anne and from Emma. Thanks for that. Obviously need to make a change to that because it's definitely not .co.uk, it's .org, but I'm sure you'll have worked that out. Look, I am delighted to hand over then now to Anne Chappell from Brunel, University of London. Thank you, Anne, for what you're sharing. We're going to hear from Anne for about 15 minutes, and then we'll do the same from Emma Thompson. That'll leave us time at the end for questions. So just you save your questions, put them in the chat, and then we'll do our best to answer everything you've got before the end of today. So thanks. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. I know we're going to swap screens, so I'm just opening up the right one. Didn't want to do that before we'd finished watching the video and so on. Is that all right, and can everybody see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Is that all right, and is it all right for size as well on your screens?
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Okay. Well, just to say thank you very much for inviting us to talk. And I know Ellen's not here. She does send her apologies for the reasons Phil identified earlier. And it's lovely to see people in the group here who we've met before, and also colleagues that we may not have. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk about the work that we've been doing for a number of different reasons, and we're really excited and committed to this collaborative conversation that needs to keep taking place in this area. So many thanks, and we're looking forward to your comments later on. So we are talking this afternoon from a project that we have been doing. We've been working on this area since 2019, but we very specifically and most recently finished a project that was called Grown Up Children from Armed Forces Families. And we were particularly interested, it was some internal funding that we had from the university, and we were particularly interested in thinking about reflections on experience of childhood and education, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So as we've identified, and our contact details are there, but we can share those again through the slides that I know Vicky's going to send out after the event. But this idea about staff being well informed. So some of the presentations that we've given recently on our work, and I know a conversation that many of us kind of share, is there are so many well-meaning grown-ups who are seeking to do good things to support this community of young people. And well-meaning is brilliant, but knowledgeable is crucial, as identified in the video. And so what we wanted to do is just maybe draw out some things today as provocations and thoughts from the work that we've done, just so that we can start to contribute to that conversation. So this was the area of the Thriving Lives Toolkit, which obviously Phil mentioned in the introduction. So for those of you that don't already know about the project we've been doing, we've obviously got a range of resources and policy documents and research that's already been done, primarily talking about the pressures that these young people face, the kind of specific challenges that arise as a result of the lives these children live. And again, that was captured in the video. The Office for Students at university level had considered equality gaps and support needs that may be in existence, and they refer to them there as military families. We don't, as colleagues know. But one of the things that we were really struck by was that grown-up children are missing from this conversation. And actually, there's a developing focus and emphasis, and has been for some time, through things like SCiP and other charities and work that's going on with school-age children. But the extent to which we were thinking about those that were grown up, which is the project that we started in 2019 when we started looking at university students. So for those of you interested in any kind of literature, one of the things that we were really interested in is, you know, when we're building accounts of what we know about an aspect of society, who's missing, whose stories are missing from the conversation. And we very much felt that grown-up children were part of that missing group. And that we needed to know more about them. And as you all know, and from the video at the start, there are high levels of mobility, and we were really interested in exploring a little bit about that. So the idea being that we recognise this group are not homogenous, they're not all the same, their lives are very complicated. Within the armed forces, people have different jobs, they have different roles, they get different periods of posting. You know, some of them live in the same place their entire lives, others don't, others move much more rapidly. So there's a whole set of complexities that ensure that this group are not homogenous. And we thought that it was quite important that we start to learn something from this group who have now grown up. So the specific aims of the work that we were doing related to finding out how childhood and education were experienced by this grown-up group, to seek their advice, and we're going to share some of that later on, and to use this knowledge to help inform policy, practice, and make sure that we're all more aware. So that was what we were aiming to do in the project. And for those of you interested in the mechanisms, we undertook questionnaires and interviews. The age range was from 18 to 80 in terms of age, and we got 119 responses in terms of the questionnaires. And it was a complex, it was 28 question, but multi-stage complex questionnaire. We were doing this as a little pilot with some internal funding, and we were blown away that we got so many responses. I think that one of the quotes that some of you have heard me say before, one of them said at the start of the interview with me, I've actually got a lot to say and nobody's ever asked me before. So that was really interesting for us in terms of thinking about what we were seeking to do. So here you can see, and as we've said, the slides will be shared afterwards, but for those of you interested in the mechanisms, that is what we did. So what we wanted to share this afternoon were some of the main findings. And many of you will understand the kinds of things that we're going to talk about and probably recognise those already from the children that you're working with. But the key areas were their experiences of both the challenges and opportunities that arise from hypermobility, as we're calling it, their kind of positives and challenges around identification, sense of pride, things around friendship, things around their relationships and talking with their parents about their experiences at different points in the life course, the stability and instability and what that meant in terms of integrating potentially into civilian life, sometimes whilst they were still part of the armed forces community, but also for some of them at the point that the parent left the armed forces. The uniqueness and both the challenges and opportunities there, and the nature of their childhoods in relation to others and the impact of those experiences. And as I said earlier on, we were really keen to find out what their advice was, and we're going to share a kind of summary of that for the schools and teachers element of this. So in terms of the themes, we've highlighted there then those particular areas. There was also some reference to things around university attendance and also issues around community belonging and instability that also connected to these ideas around identification. And I'm going to share some extracts in a minute with you. What was also interesting was the way in which they felt it had been impactful on their lives, with recognition that this might relate back to children who were currently experiencing the same kinds of lives. Now, one of the things that it's really important to say is we were really struck when we were dealing with 18 to 80-year-olds about the potential relevance to current children. And so what we had whilst we were doing this project, we had some regular conversations with, we're quite near RAF Northolt here. We work very closely with the community development officer there, who's part of the London SCiP hub that we belong to, but also conversations outside of that. And what we did was we sort of sense checked as we went along whether what we were saying made sense for the children now. And there were things that they said and we'd say, do you think that is still? Absolutely. And let me give you some examples of conversations I've just had with families about it. So we were really struck by that, and it was much more powerful. We thought we were just kind of piloting and exploring whether there might be something to learn. But as it turned out, the feedback from those who are working directly with these children at this time was absolutely. So when we got the participants to think about kind of challenges and opportunities, what was really interesting was that mobility and friendship were mentioned explicitly and repeatedly. Now, the reason we ended up with a number of mentions here, those of you who are into quantitative data and statistics will go, really? You tallied them up? We tallied them up because they were coming from qualitative data. And so what we wanted to make sure was that in representing this, we were able to say, look, how many times did they mention these kinds of things? Now, these challenges and opportunity slides that I'm sharing with you, they are not an exhaustive list. And I've got a link to the report at the end, so you can have a look at the other things that they mentioned in relation to the kind of the sub-themes that sat underneath those headline themes that I shared with you. But what you can see here is those ideas about the challenges relating to high levels of mobility, making, maintaining, retaining friendships, moving from place to place, adjusting to a new school, isolation and loneliness, which included direct reference to boarding school. And we've already spoken to the MOD about, you know, this idea that the boarding school is the solution to making things more stable. It may be a solution to one thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the solution to everything. The saying goodbye, the interactions with people who do and don't understand the kind of experience here characterised as civilians, which is an interesting term in itself because these children are civilians, but the language used around that is very interesting. back to the video at the start and understanding the way in which things are referred to. And then these things around bullying, anxiety and confidence, lack of belonging, shyness and feeling negatively different. So those were the kinds of headline challenges that we thought would be useful to share with you today. And then what we've also got, the opportunities, and look again. Under the opportunities, belonging, meeting new people, friendships, making new friends, feeling positive about being different, developing social skills, connecting and reconnecting with other children from armed forces families. So some of these kinds of ideas that have come up, these themes that have come up in relation to being perceived as both positive and areas of difficulty. So what we've done is we've just drawn really beyond those things, just 3 key areas to think about this afternoon. So one is some quotes. So Yasmin here talks about moving to the number of schools that she did. So she talks about moving to 7 schools. She felt really fortunate because even though her dad was posted 3 times when she was at secondary school, she was able to stay at the same school. But no, she identifies that as really fortunate, and elsewhere in her story, it's because she recognises that others went to more. Now, you know, in my world and most other people's worlds, going to 7 plus the secondary school is still quite a lot of change. And Ellen was going to talk to this slide, and I know she always says for her, who has no experience of this kind of life, you know, she'd have been absolutely horrified if she'd gone to more than 1 primary school. So education-wise, Donna thinks that moving did have an impact because she couldn't always study what she was studying before, changing subjects. The curriculum wasn't always the same, different books, and maybe lost about 6 weeks of term prior to moving. This was in relation to a particular move that her and her family made. And then Annie talks about schooling again being very different. The syllabus was different, everything different. But by this point, how many schools had I been to? So you just kind of get on with it. And that's another trope that plays out, is you just get on with it, which needs some unpacking. You learn to go with the flow. I knew that an entire year pretty much in my GCSE work had been erased and I had to start again. Now, of course, we can identify that as negative, because obviously what we would ideally wish for is that all children would have stability in their education. But actually, those of you in the call who are working in schools will know, and my own experience having worked in schools as a teacher for 11 years before coming here, is that, you know, stability in children's lives is a complex kind of idea anyway. And what does it mean? And some complexity or some stability in one area of their lives might be matched with some real complexity and instability in others. And in this case, for these children, it's very particular and caused by a very particular set of family circumstances. So that is kind of the accounts that they gave there. Then we move into thinking about the idea about moving to the new school but making new friends, and we've done a paper separately around friendships and just how substantial and significant this change of friendship is. And it's not just their mobility, it's the mobility of those around them. So Yasmin did her A-levels and university was never mentioned, so she came back to the UK and she got a job. In the questionnaire, didn't attend university, although I had a place, but at 18 they were still living in Germany and they didn't feel supported to go back to the UK. But actually, in a positive, some of the others I've talked about, they stayed because they were loving it, having a ball, didn't want to come back to university, wanted to stay and make the most of that life. Ava talks about coming to university, and Ava was somebody who'd spent her entire childhood living in Germany, so they'd had postings to different parts of Germany, but she lived there the entire time. And the university had given a pack of material to international students that they give to international students in order to help her. And that idea that it gave her lots of information, and some of it was really helpful because she didn't know it, because she'd not been part of the community of the UK before joining university. So the last couple of things then are around the advice that they gave. So this is specifically extracted from the advice for schools and teachers. And what we did was we created a kind of thematic analysis that led to these bullet points of explicit advice. And some of it you will already know, because actually those of you who are working in schools, some of these things are just good practice with children, full stop, and young people. but some of them are quite interesting in terms of the way that they were thinking about advising teachers. So this notion of being understanding, and if we connect that to what Phil said earlier, you can be understanding if you are aware and you know stuff. And that's our big headline here, is the more that we know, the better we can support. Showing kindness, patience and inclusion. One of them said, please don't sideline us because we are only with you for a short time. And, you know, some postings are very short, and there are also some temporary arrangements where children spend shorter periods of time in school than anyone would wish for before they move again. And so it's those kinds of things that they were noticing, whether teachers took their presence seriously. Ask about their experience and find out about their perspectives. We speak about this group often in homogenous terms, and for all the reasons I've described and needs more writing about, we really mustn't do that. Even within the families that they described in the study, different experiences between siblings, even based on when they moved, where they moved to, at what point in their stage and age, whether there were examinations at the time, whether there weren't, what kinds of support they got from the schools they were in, primary, secondary, when their parent was deployed, etc., etc., etc. So being aware of what leads to their experiences, mobility, separation, bullying, abuse and trauma. And one of the things that we've discussed with some children recently is being aware of what's going on in the news. So there might be a quick news item that says something about what's going on in the world, and most people will just pass that off as another piece of news. But for some of those children, they are working through what that might mean for their family, what that might mean in relation to deployment and what the implications might be. And sometimes those things are not big deployment matters, like particularly notable wars, but indeed other things that may be going on where the armed forces are being sent to patrol or to take care of or to look at or to keep the peace. Being especially understanding in schools with small or no armed forces community, thinking about emotional support and counselling, which I know a number of schools offer through things like pupil premium, service pupil premium, checking for gaps in knowledge and providing support for those gaps. That's a whole conversation in itself. Supporting integration with other children, again, thinking about how that works and how it works differently with different communities. If you've got a large community of children from that community, a large group of children from the community, then the chances are that some of that integration might be quicker and easier because there's a shared understanding, language in our report, all in the same boat, so they get it. But in others, it really isn't. It can be very challenging and difficult. Thinking about the national curriculum and how that is implemented, even if you are in a school where it is not a requirement. For example, an academy in England where you may be able to deviate from the national curriculum, and choosing exam boards carefully in terms of their similarity and difference between GCSE and A-level, between the nuances and very specific things that some exam boards do that others don't. Communicating detail effectively with previous and subsequent schools and not penalising that temporary status, which I mentioned earlier. So,
Sorry, just to jump in. No, sorry, just to jump in. We're about to run out of time for your contribution, if that's okay. And yes, that just looks like a really excellent place to leave that slide on, if you're happy to. Can you just, if we can just pop back to that slide before, that seems like a wonderful, I know you've got a couple of other recommendations, which we'll share, obviously, when we share the slides with everyone afterwards. That's great.
All I was going to do, Phil, if it was all right, was just finish here and then just very quickly say how people can get more info about the report, because we've got an event next week where we're talking in more detail about the report. So that's all I was going to end with.
Yeah, that's kind. Do you want to put something in the chat, and then when we come back to the questions later on, there's an opportunity, then you can put some links. If you've got a link to that report, that'd be great as well. And we'll share the slides after.
It's embedded in the slides, but I can certainly put it in the chat now. Yes, so in short, just to finish, we've learned a lot from speaking to grown-up children, and we've learned a lot that we think can be helpful. Headlines today, you know, snippets and tidbits that we hope add to your conversations that we know you're already having. So none of that is intended to ignore what you already know, but just to add to that. And I'll certainly put the event information and I can share it later. Thank you.
Oh, that's really kind of you. Thank you, Anne, and really powerful advice as well. If you want to get yourself ready, Emma, then we'll just move over to you shortly. I was really struck, Anne, by your advice for schools, which is so helpful there, because sometimes it can be very difficult for practitioners to engage with research, but you've done a grand job of translating that for us, so thank you. I'm really struck by how significant just good quality listening is. When you're looking at all of those things, so much of it is about children and young people feeling heard, feeling like they're understood. And it also strikes me that there's a strong overlap for us in terms of the toolkit between staff being well informed and the two principles that precede it. One is about children being heard, and one is about parents being engaged. And so, especially for grown-up children, it's more about that direct relationship, but with younger children, certainly seeing parents as well as key facilitators is fantastic to hear. So nice to see the overlaps with that. Thank you very much, Anne, for your contribution, and we'll have time to ask you some questions later. Emma, I'm delighted to meet you today and to invite you to share your experience at a local authority and cluster level with schools across East Riding. So thank you very much for giving us your time today. I'll hand over to you happily now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Phil. And can everybody see the presentation slides okay before I start?
Yes, thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Phil, for the introduction. Much appreciated. Yeah, so thank you for the invite to come along today, and thanks, Anne, for your presentation. Well, I'd be really interested to learn more. It sounds very interesting. So yeah, it'd be great to catch up with you outside the meeting, if that's okay. Yeah, so this afternoon, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit around how we've approached Principle 7, sort of staff being well informed, but more also on a local authority level. So I'm going to talk you through a project that we've been undertaking in partnership with York St John University and the Ebor Academy Trust in York. Obviously happy to take any questions, as Phil said, at the end of our presentation. So I'm just going to start off a little bit of initial context. So the East Riding, it's a large unitary authority with around sort of 350 residents. We have one military base, which is called the Defence School of Transport. This provides sort of military driver training and other specialist training courses for tri-services. So we do have a lot of families living on camp, but we also have a lot of families living off camp elsewhere. As you can see, some of the stats I've put on the slide there, the majority of schools that we have at least one service pupil on roll. We have around 11 schools that have a high number of service pupils, but as you can see, we do have quite a number of schools with only one or two service pupils. So it's sort of an interesting mix really in terms of that range across East Riding. So a couple of years ago, myself and colleagues started to engage more with schools, trying to look at what we can do to improve support for service children and young people. And one of the things we first looked at doing was identifying service pupil champions, so one per school cluster. But when we sort of doing this initial work, one of the things we came across initially was around the comments from teachers and schools, often commenting they only had one or two service pupils and that they were fine. And then this obviously may well be the case, but as time went on, it kind of became more apparent that actually sometimes these service pupils may be masking, they may be struggling with certain issues, and so they seemed fine. So it sort of picks up what you said, Anne, around that sort of the lower number of service pupils in a school and actually still making sure you've got that support in place. So really, we realise we need to do more with schools to ensure that the service pupil needs aren't hidden and to encourage schools to dig a little bit deeper. So even if they had those few service pupils, they still need that awareness of challenges they can potentially face, and that from time to time they may need that additional support. One thing as a local authority which we realised was that many schools weren't aware of the Armed Forces Covenant duty and the need to show due regard in relation to education. And as a local authority, obviously we had a responsibility for ensuring awareness for school staff and kind of what that meant in practical terms. So what we're trying to do is kind of, we believe, sort of summarise quite nicely in this statement here from service pupils. So we don't want to be seen as different, we just want to be understood. And it's not, as we also are aware really, it's not about giving them special treatment, but as you'll all recognise, what they do need is that understanding by those people around them, whether it be school staff, social care, education, or other professionals, is making sure they've got that support in place when needed. So we kind of identified that need for a training session to raise that awareness of this. So schools were a top primary target audience was schools, but there was a lot of pressures on schools. So we had to be very careful what we can fit in. So what the key messages we need to get across and how would be the best way to do that for schools and other educational professionals. So some of you might have heard or even potentially attended the Military Human CPD training. So this is a one-day course which was developed and delivered by Nick Wood from York St John University. He's also a veteran himself. Today I think he has trained over 5,000 people from a range of organisations, so NHS, MOD, military charities and local authority staff. The training itself provides an overview of some of the academic theories about the military transition and adjustment journey, and it focuses very much on elements such as military culture, ethos, values and identity, and looks around that impact of transition to civilian life on serving personnel and their families. So I had been in this course a few years ago, so I thought, I wonder if I ask nicely, if they'll consider doing a much shorter version tailored towards schools. Luckily, they kindly agreed to do that. So they developed a 1-hour session of that 1-day course. However, we knew we needed to sort of pair this academic theory up with more practical advice and information for schools and signposting to key resources and support that was available. So the next part of the training. So Nick would put us in touch with Louisa Dobson. As some of you might know, she's the head of Inspiring Choices programme at UniConnect North Yorkshire in York, and also Becky Dixon, who is a Service Families Liaison Officer at the Ebor Academy Trust in York. So part of Becky's role is working with schools to ensure they are clear about the challenges and the barriers that affect service children, and ensuring school staff have that increased confidence and understanding to support service children. So Becky delivered the second part of our training. So Becky's part of the training was to cover the more practical sort of knowledge and information for schools, and looking at the common themes in terms of challenges, and focusing quite specifically on mobility, parental absence, deployment and separation, and what that means for children and how schools can support the service children through those. And also a particular big emphasis of that was signposting resources such as the Thriving Lives Toolkit, SCiP Alliance and other local sort of support and services available. So in summary, we came up with a proposal for a training session where it had 3 elements. So we had the first element was around the covenant duty, so talking about the education-specific disadvantages that service children can face and how schools can mitigate those. We then had the military human, which was a theoretical overview of the impact of military culture and transition. And then we had Becky Dixon's session on the challenges and barriers and the practical ways and resources out there available for staff to use. And obviously there was time at the end for question and answers, etc. So I won't go through the aims and objectives. I know you're going to share the slides, Phil and Victoria, so just leave them there. So just to summarise really what we did. So we managed to secure a small amount of funding to pilot 4 sessions last year, and this included 41 school staff, and that included council staff and also military charity reps. Excuse me. So the intended included safeguarding leads, head teachers, SENCOs. It also included children's centre coordinators, education welfare officers, social care staff, educational psychologists, basically anyone you can think of to do with education, and they came along. We also had representatives from SAFA as well, which was great to get that sort of wide audience. So as we went through, we modified the training as I went through each session. It was a bit of a learning exercise really as well. But in summary, what we kind of developed was a overall 2-hour session, open to a wide range of audiences, schools, social care and other education professionals and charities, looking at that theoretical view, but also the practical side. I think really our intention was to ensure that those attending the training, it kind of sparked their interest to find out more, and then hopefully the idea was that they then reflect on their own practice and look at how they can support service children further. So we undertook a survey to gain some feedback. There's some examples here on screen in terms of the comments that we received. In terms of the numbers, 100% of the staff attendees that came along to the training, they agreed that the learning could be applied to their work, so that was great to hear. And they also felt it was very knowledgeable and informative. And you can see there around sort of time to reflect. So that was really what we were trying to get at, the time to reflect following that training course. So what's happened following the pilot and what are our hopes for the future? So following the pilot, we shared details of the training with the SCiP Alliance. Victoria, thank you kindly for sharing the article in one of the newsletters. We had interest from a number of local authorities following that article. Had a few helpful conversations actually with the local authorities in a similar situation, looking at that support that potentially is needed and look at that training and awareness raising sessions. We also attended ModLab, which is the MOD's local authority partnership, to talk about the training. Currently in the East Riding, we're also in the middle of an Armed Forces needs assessment. One of the key things that's coming out of that needs assessment is having that awareness of the challenges that service children and families actually face. So we identified a need from that for the training in schools. As a local authority, we also commissioned a gentleman called Matt Blyton to undertake a Festival of Friends project. And this is actually looking at sort of targeted work with schools around the Thriving Lives Toolkit. So it really sort of complements this really nicely. My voice is about to go, so I'll finish my thing. We also, sort of shortly after this training had been sort of piloted, we undertook a SEND focus group. And this was with a group of families, military families, who had children with SEND. And that was a very powerful session. And that really highlighted for us the need to do further training in schools and raise awareness. That was a really key message for us. So what we're looking to do now really is to deliver further sessions with East Riding. We have been looking to secure funding to do that. We will be modifying the content slightly to include a sort of more specific focus on SEND, support for service children. I'd really just like to finish us off really to say to yourselves that if you'd like to observe one of the sessions when we run them, feel free to let me know. You're very welcome to come along and observe, and happy to have a chat with anyone really that's interested in finding out more. So I'll now take a short drink of water. Thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. I think Phil might have accidentally left in some way, shape or form. I don't know if his signal's dropped out, but thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions for either Emma or Anne that are on the call still now? No, I have. Sorry to be that person who definitely has a question. Anne, my first question for you, if that's okay, is I quite often ask this question because I think it's really important where schools, organisations haven't got much time, as we know, it can be really tricky. If there's one key recommendation, because I know on your list you had a recommendation about staff being more well informed, but if there's one key piece of learning from what you presented today, if there's one like key priority for schools, what would you say that should be? I know that's really difficult because you went through so many things that are really helpful, but as a starting point, if you were someone new to this kind of agenda in this sector, what would you say is like the main thing to focus on as that first stepping stone into this world?
Am I allowed to be a bit naughty and give you two? And I'll explain
I'll let
why.
you off with two, yeah.
The first one is the one we're doing for all children, or should be, which is finding out about them, understanding them, and getting to know who they are. Now, we're doing that for all children anyway. So for me, we've just got to do that, because if we do that in the same way as we understand all the other experiences that children bring, then we are understanding more about those experiences. So I'm sneaking that one in, Vicky, and I hope you don't mind, because that's good practice anyway, and it's what people are doing. And I think the more of that we can do. Job of the teacher is exceptionally busy. Schools are very busy. There's 1,000 things that just keep coming. Actually, that emphasis on individual children is the one that we all have at heart, and it's the reason that people went into teaching in the first place. So it's hanging on to that as best we possibly can and utilising that. The other one I do think is the curriculum, and it's recognising and understanding ways in which we can make sure that our curriculum is clear and coherent, and that where there might need to be some scaffolding into things where children may or may not have done them before, that we're thinking about that. And I think some schools are better at that than others. From our experience, we run a PGCE in the department here, so we spend a lot of time out in schools. So they would be my two things for what that's worth, if that helps. I don't know if it does.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. It's just because, like we said, that there's so many things to prioritize when you are in a school. So it's good to know what the priorities are from the research, and even your personal point of view as well is really helpful, just to have that understanding of where to start, really, because there is so many things that can be done. So it's really helpful to find out those priorities. Thank you so much. Emma, I'm going to come in with a question for you if no one else has got one at the moment. With the training and the information you provide, could you give a bit of information about who it would be relevant for? And is it then tailored for whoever comes, or is it kind of more generic, so it kind of covers different roles and different people who might want to come along?
Yeah, sure. So it's primarily targeted at schools, but we did tweak it a little bit after the first session, actually, because we had sort of education welfare officers, safeguarding governors. We had, like I said, representatives from SAFA. So we tried to make it sort of generic enough so that whichever role you had, it made sense to you. But then we had some specific recommendations for schools. But if I'm honest, the general sort of theme of the training was around that of raising awareness and understanding. So it applied to anyone really involved in education or supporting service children. So yeah, I had that kind of wider audience, which is one of the reasons we really wanted to do it, was to even sort of have it so that social care staff, for example, could join as well. So it covered more than just school staff.
So it would cover anyone who would be interested in essentially in finding out more and finding out more about experiences. Perfect. Thank you. Phil, I don't know if you've Lou's got a question before we go back to Phil. Lou, yeah.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
you can hear me. Sorry. Yeah, it's really just coming in on the back of what Anne was saying, actually, and following up on conversations that I regularly have on our families patch with the unit welfare officer when we're talking about challenges. And I think one of the big things for us is actually the dynamics on the patch, on the families patch, and how that overflows into school and how that overflows back into the patch, and the impact that it has on the child or young person's well-being. And actually there's a huge amount of that for us, certainly in Highland, of quite often quite a lot of our issues and queries are around supporting that, almost like that pastoral support and that link between the patch and the unit welfare team and the schools. And it's the whole dynamics of what goes on in the patch. And I think it sort of touched on what you were saying, Anne, in your slides, but I think it's that relational base. So yes, it's around the sense of belonging and building relationships, but it's also just the dynamics of the patch. And I think that whole, which is part of, I suppose, military life, isn't it? It is the hierarchy and the rank and who you're living next door to, and you're living and working together. So your average housing estate in a town, you're not living and working together. So those dynamics, I think, are, for us, certainly, we find that those issues are something that we are looking at and supporting and addressing and considering. So I just thought I would add that in as an extra bit.
That's really interesting, Lou. Sorry, everybody, for jumping out there. We'll come to you, Anne, in a minute. Just noting, and I think I'm wondering if other people have ideas that they could contribute to this, that I hadn't really considered until listening to you all today, that staff being well informed is partly about kind of generally being well informed about service life and what the impacts might be, but also there's kind of the ongoing daily dynamic being informed, which is about relationships. So you could train staff so that everyone roughly knows what service life can be like. You can help them, as you pointed out, Anne, to listen well to young people when they're coming in, but you also need the kind of daily keeping up to date with anything that might be changing, kind of being well informed.
And that's where that is one thing, actually. Sorry, Phil, just to catch you on that. That is one thing that we established. So we have a new unit welfare team. It's a rotation of every 2 years. We get another team that comes in. But one of the things we establish in Highland is to make sure they are connected with our key schools who have got large numbers of armed forces families. So that relationship we build from the very beginning, as soon as that new team come in, because actually those conversations are key, because the school can get in touch with them direct once we've built that relationship of this is going on. Have you got any sort of background around that? Well, actually, yep, there was a bit of a fallout on the patch, or this happened, that happened, and it all begins to make sense. So we make sure in Highland we're establishing that relationship between schools and the unit welfare team straight away, and we're building on it, and it works.
Great. Yeah, we'll come to you now, and just as well, after Anne's spoken, I'd be really interested to hear from anybody else who's got experiences of how you actually put that into practice. If you're in a school, how do you build those relationships? What's key to making those relationships work? But go on, Anne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lou, I was smiling as you were saying it, because we've got a whole load of examples from the work that we've done, and there are bits that people simply don't understand, such as a serving person gets promoted, and because of the nature of the environment that they're in, they are under kind of whatever expectation that might be self-generated or indeed generated by the rest of the people around them, that therefore those children can't play together anymore. There are gets promoted, you can no longer go into the sergeant's mess on a Saturday or a Sunday for the lunch. You're not allowed to play with those children anymore.
Yeah.
The tiniest things that aren't necessarily understood. And the other thing is the high level of mobility. High level of mobility isn't just about the child and their family that move, and Phil's heard me talk about this before. It's about the mobility around. So when you talk about saying goodbye, these children are saying hello and saying goodbye all the time to lots of different people, including, if they're in a different part of the country or indeed another country, to members of extended family. There's a whole set of stuff going on here.
Yeah.
And Lou, that idea of the rank and the social class structure is one that Ellen and I have really started to think about, and how that plays out.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's really interesting. Charlotte, you're from a Trafalgar School in Portsmouth. What have you got to share? I can't hear you. Is that just me?
I couldn't.
Oh, this is going to work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
You can hear
we're
me
there.
now.
Go,
Can you hear
Charlotte.
now?
Yeah.
Right. So basically,
Oh, you've disappeared again.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
I've just taken my headphones off. I'm just going to leave them out of the way.
Go for it.
We're a relational school, so we use relational practice to intentionally build relationships with all our students, which is a really, really good base for us to then, obviously I'm in place, especially for service children, but that means there's a definite point of contact. But basically everything we do circles in tutor, all the things we do are intentionally build relationships anyway, so that we know that service children can have a really good universal offer to start off with. And then on top of that, there's that more like personalized support. So just relationships being a base of, it's everyone's business, and everyone is looking to build those relationships so that actually service children feel like they've got multiple points of contact, even if not everyone will necessarily relate exactly to it. That's kind of my next job in the next year, is to increase all staff's awareness of actually what that might mean for children in their class. Seating plans, things like that.
That's really, really helpful, Charlotte. And it emphasizes another point that Anne and others have made before, that about good practice for all children is going to be good practice here for service children too. So thank you for that. And really interesting to hear about the model of relational. This is definitely a theme coming up today. We've got time for one other probably contribution. If there's someone else who hasn't spoken yet, who'd like to pitch in with a thought or a question or an idea about their own practice, be pleased to hear that, especially around this theme or other things that we've not heard of. I'll just leave you one moment to comment.
If no one's going to say anything,
Yes,
I'd
go on,
love to
Nikki.
say something else. Oh, sorry. I'll be quiet.
Thanks, Lou. Go on, Nikki.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just thinking we were very fortunate that we were working on the Festival of Friends with Max Lighton last year, actually, and as a school we were able to develop a Moving On All About Me pack, which helps with those relationships as a school. So we have looked at sort of talking about my family as you're moving. Are we from a military family? What does it feel like to We've thought about school, the curriculum, what we've enjoyed this year, what we've sort of covered, and how that can help the next school sort of think about the curriculum. And we've also thought about the young carers as well. And we have a young carers group in school called the Helping Hands group, and we've also devised a page for them to be talking about what's important to them. Do they have a young carers card? How can you help me? What did we do on Young Carers Action Day? And we've got some information about feelings and things at the back. So yes, we found that's really helped with developing those relationships and being able to. We'll be using them at the end of year 6 this year with the pupils moving forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Nikki. That's really great to hear, especially getting firsthand from schools what that kind of the advice we're getting from Emma and from Anne looks like in practice. So thank you for sharing that. We're almost out of time, so let me just finish by just saying a couple of things. First of all, a massive thank you to Anne, and our good wishes to Ellen, who couldn't join us, and also to Emma. Thank you so much for sharing your research and also your practice and what that looks like. Thank you also to those who've commented, sharing their practice. That's what makes an alliance valuable. Let me just remind you, please give us some feedback about the content of this. We'll be running more webinars in the future, and we'd love to know what would you like more of or less of, or what are we not doing that we could do. We'd really love to hear from you. So please do that. There's a link as well in the chat to that, to the feedback form. And also we'll be sending out the slides after, so you'll get another chance. And of course, there's loads of other opportunities to engage with support. If you've come away from today thinking, I want to do some of that, well, then there are lots of ways to connect with people, and they'll be on the slides as well, and here. Vicky's putting some of those links in the chat. So please do tell us through the community consultation what your current needs are, and that could be anything from funding to practice to support to policy changes. And we will do our job to amplify your voices with government and with other policymakers, which is what makes the Alliance strong. But only ends with me saying a huge thank you to you for engaging with us. I look forward to seeing you in the autumn, and have a really great summer when you get there. Thank you very much.